Hello and welcome to the Recruit Rockstars Podcast, where we focus on the people part of your business. Every Tuesday and Thursday, I have a world-class expert on talent and recruiting so that you can build a company filled with rock stars. And I have bagged the elephant today, listeners. I have waited months and months to get this individual to agree to be on the show, and we finally did it. Marcus Buckingham. Now, I'm going to tell you briefly about Marcus Buckingham, which I probably don't need to, but just in the off chance that you've read all his stuff and enjoyed his work and you forgot his name, I'm going to go through it, and then we're going to have a fascinating 20 minutes about the lies about work. And ladies and gentlemen, there are a shitload of lies about work, and we're not going to cover all of them today, but Marcus is going to help us with some of the biggest ones you need to think about. Now, Marcus is a global researcher, and he's a thought leader, and he focuses on people's strengths, which sounds kind of obvious, but when you think about it, it's not, because from birth, we're kind of trained and brought up to focus on shoring up our weaknesses, and we coach our people on how do we improve your weaknesses, and he takes a very different point of view on that, which we're going to talk about. He's helped pioneer the future of how people work. Spent about 20 years at Gallup as a senior researcher and studied many, many companies before becoming co-head of the ADP Research Institute. Now, along the way, he also started his own company with a very clear mission, which was simply to start a strengths revolution. And he really wanted to focus on one idea, which is that when your people spend their time at work on things they want to do and things that they're great at, they will flourish and your company will flourish. Now, it sounds kind of obvious, but it's hard to actually pull off. So he's written about it in these best-selling books published in every language, blah, blah, blah. Get him on Amazon. First, Break All the Rules. Then he wrote Now Discover Your Strengths. Go Put Your Strengths to Work. His new book, probably my favorite, is The 9 Lies About Work. The 9 Lies About Work. And we're not going to cover all 9, so you got to get the book, but we're going to cover a couple of them. And so with all that, I am thrilled and a little humbled to welcome Marcus to the show. Hello, Marcus.
Hi, Jeff. How are you?
It's so awesome to have you on. I don't even know where to start, but why don't we start at the 50,000 foot level, which is this strengths focus. What turned you on to this? What was the light bulb, if you can remember, that went on that made you say, people are getting this wrong, and instead of focusing on improving your weaknesses, we should be focusing on leveraging strengths?
Well, I'm a researcher by background. So, and by researcher, I mean I joined the Gallup organization fresh out of university to build psychometric selection tools, actually, to measure people's personalities. So my whole focus is on drawing conclusions from what's knowable in the world, what's measurable in the world. And as part of all of that research, we spent a lot of time interviewing really, really good managers about what they do and how they get the most out of their people. And consistently, if you do a study in a contrast group and you ask the study group of really great managers where they spend their time, focusing on people's strengths, fixing their weaknesses, it's not even close. The best managers, and it's differentiated, it's not just all managers. The best managers disproportionately go, I spend most of my time trying to figure out what a person's strengths are so that I can leverage them intelligently. And average managers do the opposite of that.
So let me pause you, because everyone right now is listening saying, well, I'm a good manager. I'm a best manager. How did you define the best managers? Do they have the best financial performance or something else?
Well, it depends on the company. So if we were looking at Merrill Lynch, it would have been financial performance plus engagement. If it was a restaurant company, it was the performance of their restaurant. If it was Federal Express, it was the performance of their district. So what's performance driven? It's also a function of engagement scores. So we have a really reliable way to measure the engagement of a particular team.
Got it.
So you can look at a combination of basically per person productivity and engagement. When you sort the study group versus the contrast group like that, and you look at a simple question around time, as a manager, you only have time.
Yep.
So where are you spending most of your time? And as I said, it isn't even close. The best managers will invest a disproportionate, and it's not balanced. The best managers are never balancing. They're always trying to maximize the return on the investment of their time. And it is a finding. It's not a philosophy. It's not
It wasn't something you just woke up and said, I had this idea and I'm going to write a book. You saw this consistently in company after company.
Yes. Yeah. And it is counterintuitive because the opposite is what we're encouraged to do from school. You parents.
Sure, you get a C. What are we going to do to bring up that C?
Yes, we have a whole ethos that says strengths are fine, and then your weaknesses, we call them your areas of opportunity. We call them your areas for development.
Right.
We're
think afraid of the word weakness.
Right. Well, and we seem to believe that your weaknesses are where you'll grow the most.
Yeah.
Your weaknesses are where you'll learn the most.
Right.
Your strengths are done. They're finished. Well done. Yep. Pat you on the head.
Yep.
You get an A, a C, and an F. We'll focus on the F, not because we're bad people, but because we make a calculation. We make a return on investment calculation that your F is the place where you has the maximum amount of opportunity. And when you look at the actions and the practices of the best managers, they don't think that at all. They fly completely in the face of that. Your strengths are your areas, not where you're most finished, but the areas where you have the greatest potential for growth, for learning, for resilience, for contribution.
Yep.
Your strengths are your areas of greatest potential impact, and your weaknesses, we should call them that, by the way, are things that you need to manage around.
And so and I'm just curious, you found this consistently.
Yeah.
That managers spend their time on this, but did you figure out why? How did they learn it differently than the rest of us? Because like you said, we all learned this from age 5.
Yeah, I think anyway, and the answer will vary person by person, but it's a function of looking at the outcome. If you're a manager in the real world, you figure out pretty quickly, if you're smart, that in order to get the best outcome, you can either, you have a choice. You can either spend all of your time trying to train people so that they're the same as one another. Yeah. You have to define a model of what the good salesperson is like or what the good nurse is like, and then force people to adhere to that model. Or you can figure out the uniqueness of each person. Even though there are 10 people in the same job and they're paid in the same way, they nonetheless think differently, are driven differently, build relationships differently, are motivated by different things. Yep. And then use that. And so the best managers figure out that I just don't have enough time in the day to try to change every one of my people so that they adhere to some model. It's just a waste of time. And the best managers aren't into wasting time. It's kind of it's a psychological version of Peter Drucker's formulation about great entrepreneurs and great companies. That the great companies get their strengths together and make their weaknesses irrelevant. Why? Because, as Drucker would say, you don't have unending resources. You have limited resources. So you've got to think about where you're going to get the best return. Same's true for managers. Yeah. You could say that it's a moral thing, that I just want to capitalize on people's uniqueness because I care about the uniqueness of a human. But it's actually more pragmatic than that. If I want to win, I got to make massive best use, most intelligent use of the unique strengths that a particular team brings.
So all that sounds great. And let's say we can do it. Let's say we see the light. Everybody say, fuck it. I'm not going to focus on people's weaknesses. I'm going to focus on their strengths. What have you learned are the best practices to shore up the organization around people's weaknesses? Do you hire other people to complement them? Do you change the scope of the person's job so they're not doing the thing that they stink at? Like, what do you do? Because look, I guess I still got a business to run. I still have things that have to get done. How do I make up for those weaknesses?
Well, you mentioned the book that just came out, 9 Lies About Work. The first lie is that people care which company they work for. Measurably, that's completely untrue. Yeah. We care which company we join, which is why companies doing a lot of work to have a coherent talent brand. Right. That's not a bad use of time.
Yeah. That attracts people. It's like attracting a customer to try your product for the first time, but it doesn't keep
them. Right. So you're attracted to that kind of talent. You care which company you join. Once you're there, who you work for, how long you stay, how productive you are, depends massively on which team you're on. Yeah. And we can know that because you can see varying levels of voluntary turnover by company, and they vary within company much more than between companies, which means that the thing that the person is leaving or the thing that the person is staying at isn't the company, it's the team.
And by team, you're saying team coworkers even more than the manager they're working for, or is the manager included in that? Because I've always learned people don't quit companies, they quit managers. Are you saying it's the broader team?
Well, we wrote about people leave managers, not companies, in First Break All the Rules, which is my...
Yeah, that's where I learned it.
Right. But when you really push on that,
Yep.
and we've just finished, as part of this ADP Research Institute, we did this 19 country study of engagement around the world, looking at what are the levels of engagement around the world. And it turns out, although it varies a little bit country by country, we're at about 17% fully engaged.
That's amazing.
17%.
Horribly low.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
And then you look at why, what drives engagement, and the overall, by far the strongest driver isn't education or length of service. It isn't which region you're in or which industry you're in, which country you're in or your gender. It's whether or not you say you work on a team. So the answer to your question isn't one or the other, actually, because when you push on it, you're 2.3 times more likely to be fully engaged if you say you work on a team. If you say strongly agree to the question, I trust my team leader, then you are 12 times more likely to be fully engaged. So the team is the gateway, and then deep trust, not 4, 5, not 3 and 4,
Yeah.
5.
Yeah.
Deep trust in the team leader is then the accelerant for your productivity and your commitment. So to answer your question about how do you deal with weaknesses, by far the most effective technology that human beings have come up with, and they came up with it about 50,000 years ago, to make use of the fact that human beings are different, with different weaknesses and different strengths. By far the best technology is called a team.
Yeah.
The team's point is that we can, in combination with one another, complementing one another, achieve together what we can never achieve alone.
So is that as simple as division of labor, or is it something more than just simple division of labor?
It's on one level, it's complementarity. It's the fact that I'm not you.
Yeah.
And so I've got to figure out as a team leader or as a team member where you have great strength that I rely on, that I lean into, and then we figure out where I have the same, and then together, where's the overlap? So on one level, it's that. On another level, the team is a wonderful place in which you find psychological safety. So a team is a place in which you can share ideas, unformed innovations, new things that you might want to practice and try without them being finished.
Yeah.
A team is a place in which you put something out there and somebody doesn't squash it and somebody doesn't steal it and pass it off as their own.
Yeah.
So whether it's complementarity or whether it's psychological safety, the combination together is an incredibly powerful one.
It sounds a lot like a healthy family is what you're describing is a healthy family, right? We trust each other. We love each other. We support each other.
Absolutely.
We
The
don't
two
kick
most
them when they're
basic
down.
human needs are when you push on what happens on the best teams. The two most basic human needs that anyone who's running or building a company has got to figure out, and it's pretty simple when you push on it, is number one, make me feel part of something that's bigger than me.
Yeah. Which is a basic human need, right?
Make me feel right. Make me feel part of something that we all share.
Yeah.
And the thing that we all share is at the team level. And then second, make me feel special. Make me feel that you see me. Make me feel it's like in the family you go, we're part of a family and our family believes this, but you are my favorite child.
So how do you pull off that? Because those don't those inherently conflict?
No. And it's not necessarily easy to integrate those two things. In most of the leadership development stuff, and the leadership development in the United States is a $15 billion industry as we try to build better leaders. We've really massively overcomplicated that challenge by defining these ever more intricate and arcane competencies that every leader is supposed to possess, which of course, the last lie in the book is that leadership is a thing, because clearly you can't measure it. And anyone who pretends that they can measure the qualities of leaders is simply making it up. And we need to stop doing that. It's just, it's kind of embarrassing.
But companies will pay for it.
Yes. But the two most basic needs are make me feel part of something and then make me feel special. And you're right, that's not easy to integrate, but it is the right hard thing. And the right hard thing is for a leader to go, can I make you feel as though you have a sense of purpose or mission or contribution that is the hill we all are trying to take? Right. Can you share stories and heroes and rituals that bring that mission or contribution to life? That is an ongoing effort to reify what we're all about. Point one. Point two, can you then pay attention to each person that's walking up that hill with you?
Yeah.
Can you figure out where their unique propensities lie? Can you make them feel as though you're really genuinely paying attention to them? By the way,
it has to be real. It has to be authentic. You can't fake that. Great leaders cannot fake that.
No. And the way you make it real, funnily enough, Jeff, is through one simple thing, frequency. If you want somebody to feel as though you're paying attention to them in your work, there's one ritual that every single one of your listeners should do tomorrow. It's simple and it's free, and most of us don't do it. But if you're running a team, you need to check in with each person on that team individually for 15 minutes every week. Every week. We don't do that. We think we should do management of people sort of twice a year when we set goals.
Right. Or we spend the time with the B players or C players who have all the weaknesses and the crappy performance.
And we let here's my A player. She doesn't need my help.
Exactly.
Like LeBron James doesn't need any coaching.
Right.
You know, Tiger Woods does. Although it's funny, of course, when you look at excellence in any professional sporting endeavor, you never see excellence occurring without individualized coaching.
Sure.
Weirdly, in the world of work, somehow we believe that A players, they don't need the coaching. It's the C players that do. I need to get you an executive coach is code word today for you're failing as a leader.
We have a problem. Yeah,
we have a problem. So, but in terms of like, what is a takeaway from this that you get from studying the best leaders? They check in with each person 15 minutes every 52 weeks a year
with a discussion about strengths, not weaknesses.
About work and strengths. So the questions really are, what are your priorities this week and how can I help? What are your priorities this week and how can I help? And the conversation leads into, what are the particular things that you're excelling at? Where are the places where it went right? What's working with you? One of the big things that we've misunderstood about excellence is the raw material for your future greatness is your current goodness. The raw material for your future excellence is not your current mistakes.
Yeah.
You can't remediate your way to excellence.
Yep.
One of the biggest failings for those people just graduating from university is that they've been educated in a system where we think that A's are a function of error reduction, and they aren't. Error reduction leads from sort of -6 to 0.
Yeah.
If you want to get into any sort of excellence, whether it's as a teacher, as a doctor, lawyer, software engineer, marketing, whatever it is, 0 to excellence is an entirely different journey. And the only way you can understand and help someone on that journey is by looking at what's currently working with them. What's currently where they lean in, where they're in flow, where they seem to just have things that are attractive to other customers, other people, other team members. Yeah. What's working? The best team leaders are a brilliant audience for what's working. Not to pat someone on the head. I think so often we think that good job is the end of a sentence. And actually it's the beginning of an inquiry.
It's a good job. Why did you nail that? Why was that such a good job?
Right. What worked about it?
Yeah.
What were you thinking? Yeah. Do you understand it well enough so that you can repeat it?
Or teach the rest of the team how you did it.
Or teach the rest of the team, but also teach yourself. Are you conscious about when things go really, really well, what works? When you wrote that email and everyone leaned in, why? When you did that presentation and everyone paid attention, why? When you closed that deal, why? Why? We should be doing, and people say, well, I would love to focus on people's strengths, but I've got to be harder. I got to be tougher. And you're like, no, can you imagine anything trickier than helping someone to step back from themselves and look at something that worked and go, do you understand this well enough to be able to do this again intelligently or to do it better intelligently?
Or were you lucky? Maybe they got lucky, right?
Maybe you had no idea.
A lot of sales reps make President's Club. Were they good or lucky? You got to figure it out. This reminds me a lot, as you're talking, Marcus, about college admissions. We used to talk in the old days when I applied. They were looking for a well-rounded student. And now they're looking for more of a well-rounded class where each kid kind of brings some unique strengths, or to use your word, spikiness, as to have a class that's an excellent class. It sounds a lot like that.
Yeah, they say they don't want a well-rounded student. They want a well-rounded student body.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
I do think that we've got, yes, and we still believe in the perfectibility of mankind. Almost all school work seems to be based on the idea that each person is broken and they need fixing. Yeah. Or if they are spiky, they need to be rounded out. Right. We need to sort of credentialize each child and each person at work. Look at the resumes. Let's look at your resume. Is it? And we've made a big error there, because in the end we don't see the child and we don't see the worker. I'm sure that you in your business, you know this. It's like, if you're not careful, your resume hides the person.
Sure.
And unfortunately, when you hire someone, you don't hire the resume, you hire the person.
Right. And their whole life, everything.
And their entire life.
Yeah.
And in fact, you're hiring them for their future too, not for their past. So it's weird. A resume, we think past behavior is the best predictor of future behavior. And yet measurably, it is not.
Yeah.
Frequent past behavior is a good predictor of frequent
patterns. You're looking for patterns, right?
Patterns, exactly. Right. And so insofar as a resume can help you understand patterns, it's useful. Oftentimes, it isn't helping you see patterns. It's helping you see one-off, ad hoc, very carefully positioned events.
But in the recruiting process, sometimes the resume is all we have to go on, or the LinkedIn profile is all we have to go on, just to start to decide, should I invest my time with that discussion to understand the person's background and patterns.
Yes, although it is funny, we use LinkedIn the way that we do. It's one of the biggest. If you and I wanted to start a company, the company that we would start and that would be funded immediately is, can you find a reliable, which doesn't always mean accurate, but it means reliable, tool set that allows us to see a person's natural patterns, some of which might be achievement patterns, some of which might be stylistic or motivational patterns. Can we do that?
People have been developing online assessments for 50 years, 30 years.
But we still don't have that. LinkedIn doesn't have that. I mean, LinkedIn is a way for us to do positive self-presentation. With supposedly with endorsements from
Such a joke. So
like
look, in the couple minutes we have left, since you brought up recruiting, I'd like to understand how this ties to recruiting, because everything you're saying makes sense. Takes a leap of faith, but it makes sense once everyone's on the bus or in the boat. When it comes to getting them on the bus, what you're describing sounds really hard. How do I assemble that team, knowing everyone brings their own strengths and weaknesses? I have a lot of clients tell me they're looking for people that fit or match a culture so that people will play nicely and get along. Because what good is it if you have a bunch of people with different strengths, but they all beat each other up because they hate each other, because they're just fundamentally very different people who value very different things? How do you find that intersection between assembling a bunch of diverse people, diverse in every way, with different strengths, but also, look, we got shit we got to get done. We got a business to run here, right? So it's not, how do you do that from a recruiting perspective?
Well, the first thing that you can see in the world, because this is always the place where you should start. You start with the real world, not with some theory. You look at the real world, and the places that are attractive to talent are places that are repulsive. They're repellent. Their commitment to achieve a certain thing in a certain way is so specific that there are a bunch of people out there in the world that go, I don't want to join that.
It's self-select.
They self-select. So Chick-fil-A is a really good example of that.
Right.
Here at Kathy, when we're not opening on Sunday, we're not. And you can only have one restaurant. We're the only franchisor in the world that won't go for capital. I don't care how much capital you have. You can have one store. And now, of course, it's the most successful quick service restaurant in the world by far. It's harder to get a franchise for Chick-fil-A than it is to get into Harvard. So they created a world where they're saying to people, we stand for this. Now, you could argue with what they stand for, and they've had some difficulties with the way that they're approaching the LGBTQ community. But they've said very clearly, we don't open on Sundays. And that's like, well, if you want a place that does, then don't come work here. Patagonia is the same. You could argue Facebook is the same. You could argue that many of the most successful companies that recruit talent are incredibly opinionated about what they stand for. That's the first thing. The second is that you have to realize as a leader, for those of your listeners that are, culture is a total distraction. There is no company culture. There is no company culture. There might be company commitments, like Chick-fil-A saying, I'm not opening on Sunday. When you go to work for Chick-fil-A, the quality of the experience of working for Chick-fil-A depends massively on which particular restaurant you work.
So there is a team culture, though.
Yes, there is but it's local.
5, 10 people.
Yeah, that's what's beautiful about it, is what you're saying in your hypothetical was you get a bunch of people that are different, that hate each other. No, that's a false hypothetical, because anybody who's running a team has control. Everyone who's running a team has the power. You might think the CEO has the power. No, they don't. Actually, the CEO is sitting there trying to build a culture and has absolutely no levers to pull.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny to all these magazines that are writing about culture, this, culture, that.
There's nothing you can do.
There's no, and it's all made up. The culture of a team, though, isn't. Teams are real. There's a real person working right next to you. So you can, if you're trying to recruit, the best thing you can do is talk vividly and persuasively about the way in which you run your team. What are you doing to understand when your team works well? What are you doing to ensure that these people do support one another? What are you doing to ensure that psychological safety is achieved? And lastly, what are we doing to ensure that each person on this team feels that I am making most intelligent use of the unique strengths that each person brings? If you can be vivid about what you're doing to help someone excel on a team, okay, that's massively persuasive.
But they have to speak the same language. What if they literally just see the world so differently that it's a non-starter? I can't get them to get along. All managers, all leaders have experienced that. Why do I have to spend time babysitting you guys? They're both two top performers, but they just cannot get along.
Well, and you find that in the real world. Like that is the real world. Human beings are complicated. So all you can do is control what you can control. What you can control as a leader is saying, this is the hill we're trying to take. You can control the hill in terms of saying, these are the things that I value on this team. This is what excellence looks like on this team. And these are my expectations of you. So I can control my expectations of you, informed by the unique strengths that you bring.
Yep.
And then I can run that play. I can sort of press play and run that program. And if I'm checking in with each of you every week, because again, frequency trumps quality. It doesn't matter how good those check-ins are, do it every week.
Yep.
Then over time, we're going to get you to work together, and we're going to get you to deal with your grievances or your complaints. Or if we keep trying to do that, and we keep trying to do that, then sometimes the best way to solve a bad relationship is to get out of it. And sometimes because of the chemistry of people, you do your check-ins, you keep talking about what we're achieving together, and for whatever reason, Brian and Marjorie just don't get along. Yep. And their friction is causing cynicism and backbiting in the team. At which case, you as a team leader have to say to one of them, I love you. You're fired. I still love you.
Yep.
Because sometimes the best team leaders, you can see this in sports all the time, they have no problem at all understanding that on a team of 10 people, there is an 11th person.
Yeah.
And the 11th person is the team.
Yep.
And the team leader, has to be responsible for that 11th
I'm
person.
optimizing for the team, not optimizing for each individual person, which means my top performer, even on the sales team, may have to go. If he's kicking the marketing team's ass and beating everyone up and leaving people in tears, there may just be no place for him on the team. But most managers look the other way. They say, well, he's crushing the number. That's just Bob. We'll put up with Bob.
And that probably is one of the biggest things to take away from our time together is becoming expert at building highly effective teams and I'm not saying teamwork. I mean, that's the kind of benign balm that we put on stupid processes.
Yeah.
We need more teamwork. No. We need to understand real teams in the real world. Yeah. And when we do that, we wouldn't allow the top performer to continue to do that for long, because we would realize that the single most important unit of analysis of understanding success in business is the team. Yeah. In any business, whether it's healthcare, manufacturing, software development, financial services, everything is the team. When you lose the fact that the team is the criteria against which everything is judged, you start doing all sorts of things that seem in the short term useful. Like, well, my salesperson's still killing it. I know he's a total ass, but he's killing it. But you know what? He's destroying the team. That ruins us long term. One last point on this, and one of the weirdest things that we're trying to address in the book is, although we talk about teams a lot and it seems sensible, we don't run our companies this way. Like Google, as an example, has no idea how many teams it has. It doesn't have any idea who's on the teams. It doesn't have any idea what the best teams are. It can't see the work. Google can't see. Well, we did a best team study at Google. No, you didn't.
Yeah.
You did a study of boxes on an org chart.
Right.
Right now, we've got a world where 82% of people said they do work on teams. 65% of those people said they do more work on more than one team. And 75% of that 65% say that the teams that they're on, plural, are not reflected on the org chart.
Yeah.
Okay, well, then that means we can't see the work.
Sure. If you're going to do a study, you really got to divide them into the teams that they're on.
Well, then that brings up the big question, right? Who's the source of truth about which teams exist? Who's the source of truth? Right now, the source of truth for which team you're on is the HR department.
Yeah.
And the HR department takes it from the enterprise resource planning software, probably by Oracle or by SAP or by Microsoft, which are these are financial systems.
Yeah.
They're not actual real world in the work systems. Teams in the world aren't defined a priori according to which budget you're in. Teams are an emergent property of a bunch of requests and acceptances that are happening all the time in super dynamic ways in companies. And we can't see that. Right now, we are functionally, I'll just say that about as clearly as I can, we are functionally blind to where the work happens at work.
And this is the single most important thing in the work.
Exactly. Well, and it's where the work is.
Right.
So it's both the most important thing about the work is how we're working on a team to get it done.
Yeah.
And it's actually where the work is. Take healthcare. If you go to a healthcare experience in a hospital, you're part of a big long process where you come in at the front, and then there's a bunch of individual people, doctors and nurses and psychotherapists or whatever, social workers, who hit you at various points along the way in the process, and then you get discharged.
Yeah.
But you as a patient, what you really want is a team.
Yeah. You see them as a team. They may not think of themselves as a team, but you see them as a team.
You as the patient do.
The patient.
But the hospital, the hospital isn't run that way.
Yeah.
Hospitals don't run teams at all. Right. Doctors aren't part of any teams. And we wonder why our healthcare outcomes are so appallingly bad. Yeah. Same with schools. And we wonder why our teachers are so demoralized and our kids are so anxious. We have completely missed the importance, both in terms of productivity and psychological health, of teams. We've missed it. Mm-hmm. And the only way I feel like what's encouraging about where we are now is because of some of these light touch tools for team leaders, like Slack, like Jira, like WebEx.
It makes it worse.
Well, but you've got, what's great about some of that stuff is you've got, at least team leaders can invite people onto many, many teams at once. Yeah. So at least we can start to see from the exhaust data, where's the work happening.
But there's a long way to go. Substitute for having the conversation.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. They are
absolutely. The only reason I was talking about those tools is they do allow the team leader, not the HR function, to say, well, who's actually working with me in the world?
It's like water cascading. It's the water's going to go where it actually has to go, right?
Exactly.
HR is using the org chart from 2 years ago. That's irrelevant. Look, we could talk all day about this. It actually reminds me about some of what Jack Welch talked about, which is the importance of small teams. And he would divide the organization to keep those teams small, because that's where you get the loyalty and engagement. It seemed to work for him, at least for some period of time. So look.
Well, not we should necessarily hold Jack up for everything, but that local. There's a wonderful book that we reference actually in ours by Stan McChrystal, who was the chairman of the head of the Joint Special Operations Command in Afghanistan. His book was called Team of Teams. And he realized the only way you could move fast today in a world where the enemy he was facing was agile in the extreme. It doesn't really matter how fast you run your planning system, you can never run it fast enough to actually take into account the diversity and the dynamism of the enemy you're fighting. The only way to do it is to create lots and lots and lots of teams, and then all the mechanisms to allow the teams to have as much intelligence as possible, real-time intelligence as possible, and then let those teams make the decisions about which missions to fly or which ones to launch. And I think there's something there super instructive for anybody trying to build a company. Teams of teams. Be rabid in your understanding of how your teams of teams actually get their intelligence and actually then make their decisions.
You could study military like you described. You could study some of the great sports coaches and how they've developed a basketball team or a football team to optimize for that 11th player that you described, Marcus, right?
Yes. I've been watching this series on Netflix about the New Zealand rugby team, which is called the All Blacks. And they're, New Zealand's a tiny nation. It's like 3 million people and 47 million sheep. But they have the winningest percentage of any professional sports franchise in the world. In the last 100 years, the All Blacks winning percentage is just massively dominant. And you go, whenever you see that, you go, how do they optimize for the 11th person? How do they optimize for the team? And how do they bring such incredible talent to bear in a country that's so so small.
And did you find that the coaches are doing this? Is that the secret?
Well, it's a longer set of things that they're doing.
Yeah.
Number one, they do, no question, they have a team culture. They take their own local team culture. What is the All Blacks set of values that we believe in? What are the things that we all share? Going back to our first thing about best of us and then best of me, there is a series of rituals and practices that they have. The most famous, of course, is the haka. I don't know if you've ever seen a New Zealand rugby match. For those of you that are listening, go online and just type in haka, Haka, and you'll see, weirdly, before every rugby match, the 15 players on the New Zealand team, they do a Maori haka, which is a ritual dance. It looks weird. New Zealand, the indigenous people of New Zealand were the Maoris, and they have a very specific sort of Polynesian culture. It's where they came from there. And the dance is a manifestation of all it is to be an All Black. And when you see it, it's not angry, it's not weird, it's just solid and coherent and powerful.
It sounds like a unifying ritual before they go into battle, right?
Completely. And so as a manifestation for anybody who wants to build a team, look at New Zealand and go, what's our version of the haka?
Yeah.
Do we have one?
Yeah. We should have a ritual every morning or every Friday or whatever it is.
Something that gets people. And if you want to kind of just get your creative juices flowing, just watch one or two of them. And then you watch the other players on the other team standing there. And they all, like England plays the All Blacks. And we will stand there and we try and look across the halfway line and look defiant. Yeah. And everybody, it doesn't really matter. Every other team just simply looks intimidated.
Oh my gosh.
Just look intimidated.
They all shit their pants before the game even starts.
Exactly. It's a very specific ritual. So find yours if you want to pull the team together.
Marcus Buckingham, I cannot thank you enough. To make this actionable, people listening, don't focus on giving your best people more money to try to keep them or giving them a fancier title. Give them a great team to work on. They will be engaged. They will stay forever. They will thank you for making this the best years of their career. Only 13% of your employees are engaged. 13%. It's pretty pathetic. 13%. Is that right, Marcus?
It varies country by country, so it varies between 13 and 17%, but it's anemic.
Pretty bad. So instead of worrying about the bullshit, think about whether your team, your direct reports are great leaders of their teams, and if not, you know where you got to start. Start by getting this book, The 9 Lies About Work, a free-thinking leader's guide to the real world. It'll lay out all these misconceptions. Read all of Marcus's stuff. And Marcus, how can people learn more or get in touch?
Well, we've created the subtitle of the book is A Free-Thinking Leader's Guide to the Real World. So we created a community along with Harvard Business School called the Free Thinking Leader Coalition. So if you just type in freethinkingleader.org, you'll find each chapter played out. You'll find all the prescriptions that go along with each one. And you'll find a community of people, 4,000 or 5,000 people that come together and are trying to make deliberate and intelligent change in the way that we do work so that we don't languish at 13 to 17% fully engaged and that we can actually build more teams like our best teams.
I love the mission that you're on. I love it. I love it. Go to his online community. Say it one more time. Where can people get to that site?
freethinkingleader.org.
Fantastic. Marcus Buckingham, thank you for the major contributions that you've made, not just today, but in your body of work. It's phenomenal.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed it, Jeff.